All right, so in our last example, if you were looking at some of this and saying, wow, I get it, that's really cool, this is an object and this is an object, but there's still a lot of repetitive data going on here where we had to keep describing or creating name, health, strength, and the function or the method of that object, I would agree. And so we're going to move this whole concept into classes and instances of a class which is an object. And so this is where object-oriented programming comes in, and you might have experienced this in some of your other classes. I would assume that you have. So let's figure out what that means. So I'm going to create something called a class, and I'm going to call this character. And the idea here is that I want to be able to create a blueprint, or instead of all of this stuff that I have to repeat, I would like to kind of make a boilerplate of all of those things so I don't have to keep recreating them every time I want to create a new object. So here's a new object. So somehow I would like to kind of have a boilerplate or a template that's already created for me that I can utilize. So when I want to create a new character, I can just use that template to stamp out the name, health, strength, and method automatically for me. And so we call that a class. And I'm going to call this class, this can be whatever you want it to be. And usually by standards, conventions, that class name is capital. And so what we're doing here is we're defining generically what a character is going to look like. In other words, we know characters have a name, they have health, they have the strength, and they all have a describe method, but each of those are kind of unique to each other, right? So each time we create a new object, the values are changing, but the property and method didn't change. So we're going to what we call abstract that data, or put all of that into a class. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this word constructor, and I'm going to just type out some things to start with, and then I'll define what it means. Okay. And then just to save some time, I'm going to copy and paste some things in, and I'll describe them. All right. So what we're saying is, what this is suggesting is every time we create, like this is creating a new object, right? And when we created this object, we gave it some values. So at the time that the JavaScript interpreter read this line of code, it created this object, and when it created the object, it gave these values to that object. Well, that's really what a constructor is doing also. It kind of looks like a function or a method because it is a special word. This is not a word I made up. You have to use this word. I made up character, but I did not make up class, and I did not make up constructor, and I did not make up this, which is why they're all blue. So a constructor is a special type of method or function that runs at the time that the object is created. So we're going to create an object from character, and at the time that we create it, this method is going to run. And so, or function. So in other words, let's just create a character. So we're going to create, who did we have down here? We're going to create Aurora. So I'm going to create var Aurora. There's a spelling thing. Okay, actually I did it right. Okay, and we're going to create a little bit differently now. We're going to create a new object or a new instance. So again, notice the word is blue. I'm not making that one up. And then we're going to create a new character. So I'm going to create an Aurora out of this blueprint. And at the time we create this blueprint, I need to give the blueprint the values. So this is pretty much what we're doing here. But what's already provided for us is the property. Oh, I spelled health wrong. H-E-A-L-T-H. Let's do that. Okay. H-E-A-L-T-H. All right. So anyway, and I'll get back to these in a moment. So at the time I create Aurora, I'm going to send into the constructor the name, the health, and the strength. So just like we would with a function. So I want to send in a string called Aurora. I'm going to send the health of 150 and the strength of 25. Okay. So that means that when this line of code is run, the JavaScript interpreter is going to stamp out a brand new object, We don't have the describe in there yet, but we will. Stamp a brand new object out, and that object has a name. We sent Aurora into this parameter. We then gave the property whatever was sent into the parameter. Now these names are the same. I could do something, let's do something else just to make this a little bit more obvious. Let's see, I'm going to give it a name, a health, and a strength, just so you can see how these are all tied together. So here is the property name, just like we defined it here. This refers to this object that's being created at the time that this object it was what we call instantiated. So when Aurora is created, this variable is created. This string is put into this variable. This variable is assigned to the property this.name, which is what this is doing. Okay. Same thing with a health. So 150 is sent into this variable. This variable is then being assigned to Aurora's, or whoever is being stamped out at the moment. In this case, it's Aurora. Aurora.health is going to be whatever was put in here, and etc. So if we were to console log Aurora, let's just console log Aurora for the moment, and let's see what we have. So if we console log Aurora and control tick, I'm going to do a clear screen, a CLS clear screen. And so I'm going to do node, and this time classes. Let's see what gets print out. So what is in Aurora? Aurora is a character. It's stamped out from the character class. It's an object, and I know that because this is in curly braces, that has a property of name, it has a property of health, and it has a property of strength. And at the time Aurora was created, via these arguments, which got sent to this property, which then got sent to the object's property. What did I say? Parameter is what I meant to say. So the argument got sent to the parameter, which got assigned to the property. That's what I meant to say. All right. So if we wanted to create this second one, let's create Odin. Var Odin equals new character, stamping out from the blueprint. So now Odin will automatically have a name, a health, and a strength. And I will now, at the time that we created this object, instantiated this object is the word that's used, but we created this object. We have to send it the name, the health, and the strength, because constructor runs at this time that we created the new object. So I'm going to give it Odin. Oops, that's not where it went. We had Odin, and we had whatever it was before, 50 and 125. So now, if we console log Odin, we should also have Odin's information. We have Odin object. All right, so now let's add the describe method, because we said that Aurora can do something, right? And we said Odin can do something. So we're just going to copy this method that we already created. Now, this is another method. This is going to go outside of the constructor. And the reason for that is the constructor is, at the time that this object is created, let's send over those particular values. But describe is not receiving any values. It just is a method that we can run that will print those values out. And so if we now append aurora.describe and odin.describe, let's run it and see what happens. And so now we're getting the same thing that we had before, but we've kind of eliminated, we've eliminated all that duplicated code, and we have it all. We've abstracted it into a class, which is a fancy way of saying we've created a special blueprint that has all of these features. It has properties and methods already built into it. So if we create a new object, we're using the word new and utilizing that class, At the time that class is created, the time we used new, we created a new object. We sent it some values. Those values were assigned to our properties. And now we also, because this function, and we could certainly add more functions if we wanted to. It's just or a method. Again, I apologize for the mix-up of the words. But this method automatically comes with our character blueprint. All of our characters are going to have this method. And because we're using the word this, that's describing our object's properties. So much cleaner code, and we worked our way up from arrays all the way up to classes and creating objects from classes. And then all of the information that you used here should still work because Aurora is still a variable. It's just an object. We just created it in a much cleaner way. So that is object-oriented programming.